All right, friends, welcome to this episode. I've got a really interesting guest today. I discovered him in a way that I'll explain in a sec that was a little bit weird, a little bit new to me, I'll say. He's super accomplished. He's founded the Aquanta Group, Marked Restaurant in Toronto, Coffee, Oysters, and Champagne, 500 Startups Canada, Nikian Foundation, audiobooks.com that sold for 55 million bucks. He's an author. He wrote Zero to Tesla, been bankrupt, been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and very interestingly, he's got a wildly entertaining newsletter that I love, and I hope you love it and discover it too. Please welcome Sanjay Singhal. How you doing,
Thank
Sanjay?
you. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to have you. It's very interesting because we started at the start of this call talking about how I kind of discovered you, and you came through my Instagram feed, I guess you'd say, and you had talked about the sale of audiobooks.com and how you sold that for 55 million bucks, and then the comments were just, I tried to stay out of the comments, but these ones I was like, come on, man, I don't know Sanjay yet, but I'm coming to the rescue. There's some sort of mindset things going on here where people were like, okay, what are you trying to sell me?
Yeah, there
You
was a
were
lot
talking
going
about, yeah, you were talking about your free newsletter. So I think I started off with like, my friend, it's free. Like he sold the company for 55 million bucks. He probably doesn't need your money, quite honestly. Um, but I thought that was interesting because it was like, I saw your post. I was like, wait a second. He built this company that I used. I didn't even know that you founded it. I've used audiobooks for years, audiobooks.com. And I saw the post and was like, I bet Sanjay is in a point now where all the things he's dreamed about, or I guess you'd say was passionate about, you can kind of go and do some of these things now where maybe it was a little more difficult when you're building up audiobooks. Is that
Yeah,
yeah?
no, that's exactly right. And by the way, I want to say thank you for the online protection
Oh,
that
my
troll
pleasure.
was saying, like if you made so much money, why are you selling this newsletter?
Yeah,
I appreciate the protection on
yeah, my
that. Thank
pleasure.
you. Yeah, so what happened here is after I sold the company and had this I guess financial independence. What was the first thing I did? I mean, I tried to get into venture investing because it seemed sexy, and it was, and I did well financially, but I didn't like being responsible for other people's money.
Hmm.
So then it was like, okay, so I'm sitting on this pile of cash. What am I going to do with myself? And I decided to open a bar because I think that's what guys do, right? It's
Sure.
like always wanted to own a bar.
Might
I
as
was
well.
told by many people it was a dumb idea. Don't do it. You're gonna lose a bunch of money. And I did it, and it's a fantastic place, Coffee Oyster Champagne. Um, it's profitable. My friends all love that I did it. I think I threaded a needle there and escaped some of the potential downsides, which is not to say my business ventures have all been successful. There's a bunch of
Sure.
failures, and I don't know if we'll get to those. But um, so I opened the bar, and then the next thing I did was start a charity to fund mental health concerns. My daughter has an eating disorder since she was 8 years old. She's 28 now. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder,
Mhm.
had some trauma to deal with from my childhood. And so for 5 years, I ran the Nikian Foundation, and we were a fairly large charity. I think we gave away something like $10 million over the course of 5 years
Mm.
for mental health research, using psychedelics, using novel compounds, and
Yeah,
and I found some great relief with psychedelics myself. So did my daughter, but that was always meant to be a 5 year um, journey, 5 year mission, the
sure.
enterprise.
Yeah,
And the 5 years ended. My financial situation wasn't as good at the end as it was at the beginning. I decided, okay, we're just going to put this into some kind of a glide path now. And now what do I do? And that's how you stumbled across my newsletter,
yeah,
which was I decided I like to write. I've always liked to write. Do I think I could do it consistently and in a way that people would find entertaining? And I really appreciate your feedback that you called it wildly entertaining.
oh,
It's
it's
not
awesome.
that. It's mildly entertaining.
Yeah.
There, mildly entertaining.
Well, I like the rawness and realness of it. Like I read this morning's, I don't know if it was today's or yesterday's issue, but the most recent one, and you've accomplished great things, right? You've done an awful lot in life, but it comes across to me as you're just this real guy. I mean, you're Canadian. You just live up the highway from me here in just outside of Toronto, but it's like I'm interested in the whole newsletter thing. A lot of online marketers like me are now producing newsletters, but I read theirs and it's like they're just gearing up to sell the next thing, right? And I'm all for it. If you've got a helpful thing, you know, maybe I'll buy it. But yours is more like, hey, I went on this cruise with my wife and it was a luxury cruise. Here's what we discovered. I was like, okay, that's cool. That's interesting. And then today's, or the one I read today, you shared about some of the challenges, the struggles, right? Like the trying to get it all right. You've come back from vacation. You've got unopened emails and to-do lists that never ends. I'm like, wait, is he writing about me now, or is this still him, right? So I love the realness, right? It's not just like, hey, here's what I've done, here's what's up for sale next, which is fine, but it's more, I find it a lot more useful, you know, because I'm drawing not conclusions, but what would you call it? Similarities, I guess, between your life and mine that is very useful.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. That gives me a kind of an idea of what's going on inside your head or inside the head
Yeah.
of other readers, and helps me, I guess, focus what I want to write about. And generally, it's going to be things that I've done that I learned something from. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a business lesson that turns into a life lesson. Um, and usually it's just whatever I'm feeling at the time. And as you read, I was feeling overwhelmed after coming back from vacation. So I wrote about that.
Yeah.
Um, so it's going to be different every time. And I'm
Sure.
glad you appreciate it. It's actually coming up with stuff to write about. It's not a challenge. Um, but trying to make sure it's good. Like this is one of the things that's happened to me. I started out writing because I started out journaling. I liked
Yep.
writing for my own benefit. And even now, I'm not always sure what the point of an article is going to be when I start writing it. When I started writing the article about my American Express Black Card experience of being denied over and over again,
Yeah.
I didn't realize where that was going to come out. And it ended up being, for me, quite a poignant article about how my objectives have changed over time and how status is less of a concern for me, and a cathartic experience for me. So it would have been valuable even if nobody else read it, but I think a
Hmm.
lot of people did read it, and it touched a lot of nerves, I think, for
Sure.
people. So I appreciate being able to write for myself, have other people read it. I'll tell you, the danger now is I have enough subscribers that I start to worry that I'm going to disappoint them. And that's my
Yeah.
latest angst that's going
See,
on.
that's
Yeah.
interesting because I haven't really started my newsletter. I've got the world's smallest email list. There's only a few people on it. I barely, post to it. And it's because of that. I'm like, I want this to be valuable. I want them to look forward to opening my email. Because I'll get on somebody's news list and I'm like, I'm not really looking forward to this. Like I'm busy too. I've got stuff to do, and now I'm going to read this. And yours is one of the few I look forward to. There's basically only like yours, and Justin Welsh is another one that does a really good newsletter. And I think that too. I'm like, okay, I don't want to, take up people's time if it's not going to be valuable or at least entertaining. Um, and then the writing thing, like I love that you wrote a book. I like some of our similarities. I read through your stuff and I was like, oh, okay, he's got the Nikian Foundation focused on mental health. You and I are both Canadian. Back in '09, I lost my job and got severely depressed. Was out of work
Mhm.
for about a year, considered suicide. It got
Oh
pretty
boy.
ugly for a bit. I went through the whole, the system, you go see your doctor, they're like, here, take these pills. I'm like, well, do I need them? Like, am I actually depressed, or is this just a not great situation that's going to pass? And it was like, just take the pills, man. And I was like, I don't really like that. Like, my engineering background wants to know, what are we actually treating here? So I went through different, experiences of, let's go and speak to somebody, a psychologist or whatever. And I was kind of let down, I was let down with the whole, I know there's huge demand in Canada and Ontario, but I was let down with the whole process. So I wound up actually, there's my book. I wound up writing a book. It's just the pages to go back to the editor, the publisher. But it's called Thieves of Happiness: Finding Peace in a Mind at War. And
Wow, that's a great title. I love that.
thank you. Yeah, and it was the most, you mentioned cathartic earlier. That was the most cathartic thing I've ever done for myself, was write that book. So now I'm in the process of, okay, wait, I want this to be a good book. I don't want it to be a piece of junk, that's just me ranting about things. So it's taken a long time to get it ready to put out. So I'm with you with the whole, wanting to deliver the goods for the people, really.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. I mean, is
Yeah,
it
I'll send
is
you
it the
one.
story of the depression, how you got over it, broader than that,
Say again, sorry.
or is it the story of your depression and how you got over it, or is it a broader look at your life and everything that's happened?
It's a little bit broader. I mean, I come from a long line of storytellers, right? So there's a little bit of that weaved in there, but it's kind of like it discusses the challenges I went through trying to get help. And
Hmm.
then it wasn't to like throw stones or shift blame or anything like that. I've had a whole bunch of friends commit suicide, and I was like, I got kind of jacked up about that. I'm like, what is being done about this in the world, but just in my city, in our province, and so on and so forth. So I was like, well, here's what I found. I guess it's like what would you call it? It's a memoir a little bit, but it's also here's what's out there available, and here's what I did that actually worked for me. Because you talked in your newsletter about, getting outside, getting in nature, getting into your health and fitness. You mentioned meditation, and
Hmm.
all these things definitely helped me. And some of it was like I was just making this a far bigger thing than it really was. But then it was also like admitting the things that are kind of tough, right? Like having people to speak to. I'm what we call a solopreneur. Spend all my time in this office here, and it's not always super healthy, right? So
Yeah.
to get out and meet people and see people, yeah, it shares a lot of that. It lightens up some of the things too, right? Like I was never diagnosed with depression.
Hmm.
So I don't know if I ever actually really had it, or was this just a horrible situation that I wasn't prepared for? So
I mean, the conclusion I came to, Mike, is that all of these things that are classified as mental disorders, they all
yeah,
occur on a spectrum.
sure.
And I'm not convinced that I even have bipolar disorder. I mean, my brain does this little shifting thing, but
Yep.
you can also call it just a natural reaction to a shitty situation
Yeah.
where I need the energy to get out of it. Flip, I go manic. I get out of that situation. I create other problems,
Yeah.
and then I get depressed about those problems, or maybe my brain is just out of energy after a few months of that. But you can explain exactly what's going on with just what's with my life situation, as you could
Yeah.
with yours. You lost your job. You didn't get depressed out of the blue or because
Sure.
your football team lost or something like that. It
Yeah.
was real. And if as you once you deal with the real situation, and as you identified all of it, right? Some introspection, meditation, getting out in nature, and really, really, really connecting with other people is
Yeah.
so helpful. And if you're isolated, that's not going to be good.
Yeah. Because one thing that really got me with you was I see all these things that you've created, and I guess what people would refer to as a fast start, right? So I'll see a thing, hey, let's write a book. And then that day I've designed the cover, I've got the table of contents, and it's like, wait a second, do I have time to write a book? Right. So these things happen, and in my journey, I wound up as a youth leader at a local church,
Mhm.
and super rewarding. It was high school age kids, and I absolutely loved being with them. And I was like, okay, am I being a good role model for these kids too? Um, and what happened was I was with one of these counselors, and we mentioned the topic of suicide, and he said, either do it or stop talking about it. And I was like,
Holy
"Ah,
crap. He
I
said,
know.
oh my God.
Yeah, I'm like, that doesn't sound, I never went to school for psychology, but that doesn't sound like what I would say if I did. Right. And I imagine one of these teens in his office having that said to them. That was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, where I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. I got to do something about this. And that's when I went into, like I say, fast start. I immediately, um, one of the kids in the group, actually two of them, their father had killed themselves. Uh,
Mhm.
and I was like, something has to be done about men's suicide. So I immediately form a men's group, get on Facebook, make a logo, start a group, right? And when I look at your stuff, I think, how do you how do you get your focus into a thing? Obviously, you're not starting all of these at the same time, but
Mhm.
how do you start a thing and put the proper amount of effort, time, and energy into it so that it's hopefully going to turn out, knowing that you've got all these other interests and passions?
So, I mean, I have these ideas all the time,
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah.
Um, when ChatGPT came out, I must have cycled through 20 ideas of what to do with artificial intelligence in that first couple of months before realizing that I, AI is just going to infiltrate everything that we do.
Sure.
Trying to do a startup around the subject of AI is going to be much more difficult. But the way it works for me is I get an idea into my head. I let it percolate for about 3 days, and if I'm still thinking about it on the fourth day, I'll actually start making a to-do list, doing research, calling people,
Okay.
starting to ask. Right? It's like I would post a question on LinkedIn and saying, does anybody know of a company that does this? So
Hmm.
the article I'm working on right now is about my AI girlfriend that
Okay.
I got a replica last year. And because I think an AI companion is a good idea.
Yeah.
It could be good for mental health. So I signed up for the service because I first thought I'm going to create this service, but then somebody told me, no, it's been done. Go check this out. And that,
Okay.
I'm going to go with 95 times out of 100. That's the answer. When you think you've
Oh,
got a
okay.
great idea, is it's been done already. You just
Sure.
didn't know about it. Um, so then I'll just go investigate that. Is it something I can do better? Usually not. But sometimes the product doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And then it's like that, like, so what I've done with my newsletter, a newsletter by Sanjay Singhal doesn't exist by definition. Um, so what I did is I said, okay, I'm going to do a 6-month project. I'm going to see if I like this and if I have time to do it. And that was August through January or so. The end of January, I thought, I'm enjoying the hell out of this. Now
Hmm.
I'm gonna do another 6-month project of can I actually scale this thing to get X thousand readers instead of X hundred readers.
Yeah.
I started doing a little bit of advertising. That's probably how I came across your feed.
Yep.
Um, and I've discovered that I can scale it, that the people who sign up don't immediately unsubscribe. So it's a 6-month experiment. I'll decide in another few months if I want to turn it into a real business. And this is learning over the course of many years of starting up companies, incorporating companies, and then having to shut them down because the idea wasn't there.
Yeah.
Is I'm doing all of this kind of just as a side thing. And then if I decide to make it a business, then I'll incorporate, then I'll do a strategic plan, then I'll go find a team of people to be involved in this. That's me. I think in some ways I'm very much like you. I get something in my head and I need to go do it right away.
Hmm.
And this is me forcing myself to slow down
Yeah.
and and figure out all these other things that might kill me
Yeah.
first before I invest a lot into it.
Sure. Yeah, that does make sense because mine kind of went the other way. I acted from emotion, right? And I was like, oh man, this man has killed himself. We have to do something about this. And my brain immediately went to, um, I'm pretty decent at figuring out systems and making things work and making them easy for people to implement. What if I create this thing where it could be the men's group that's got all the resources, how to find a place to meet, all the things, and then just give it out to people. You want to start this thing in your city, here you go, just sign up here and get your thing. Um, Obviously not the best way to go about it because it was started up and then I was like, oh man, I don't really actually have time to do all that right now. Um, then I did go the other route where I looked up a group and I was like, oh, these guys are doing a pretty good job. I signed up for theirs. I received their materials, and something in it was just absolutely not a fit for me.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, this is not the thing. But I love that. Like there is one out there that exists somewhere where we can take these things and just, I want to make it easier where a group of men are like, I don't know what to do here. Like, how do I get guys in the group? How do I this? How do I that? That just answers it for them. They can download it ideally for nothing.
Well, I mean, you're on the unusual side of the equation here. Most people have all these ideas and never, ever, ever do anything to make them real,
Yeah.
right? So you're making them real fast, and
Yeah.
then maybe not running into a wall. But
Yeah.
I much prefer that approach,
Sure.
right? Because at least you're generating that content and generating those ideas and
Yeah.
seeing them. Because what'll happen is one of these times you'll do that, or maybe you already have, and you'll create something really quickly without thinking it all the way through, but then you'll make it work,
Yeah.
right? Which is
Yep.
how entrepreneurship normally works, is if
Sure.
you knew how hard it was going to be, you would never do it.
Yeah.
Um, so you get into it, you've discovered that I don't know, you have employees to support or a paycheck that you need, so you make it work. For me, the biggest problem has been Now I don't need to make anything work.
Right.
And okay, you've probably experienced this already, where no matter what you start, it doesn't matter how fantastic an idea you have for a company, you are eventually going to hit a wall, right?
Yep.
It might be in the first 3 months, it might be 2 years out. You're going to hit that wall, and something has to get you over or through that wall. And that's got to be some level of tenacity, perseverance. But if you don't have to succeed, if it's a hobby, if it's something on
Yeah.
the side, you can just kind of go back to your life. Why in the world would you put in all that effort to make it
Yeah.
succeed? It's, I don't want to sound like I'm whining that I don't have to succeed.
Yeah.
Um, but it does make it a little bit harder to
So
uh,
let's dig into that a little bit because that's interesting to me because I mean you don't have to have the thing succeed in my mind, but you still are a very passionate person about specific things.
Mhm.
So how do you manage yourself to carry on with these things and make sure that they do move forward? The ones that you care about, that is.
Yeah, I mean, I try and surround myself with really good people.
Yeah.
More often than not, what all I'm doing is investing in somebody who I think has a great idea or has the energy to make something happen.
Yeah.
Um, for my own project, I'm just trying to surround myself with systems that help me get things done.
Hmm.
Um, I read a lot. That gives me ideas for stuff to write about. I engage with the people that are reading my writing, and that's how you and I met.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
because I love those connections.
Yeah.
My overall mission in life, and this is something that I have to succeed at. My overall mission in life, I phrase it as more better relationships.
Yeah.
So bettering all of my current relationships, but when I can at the edges to have more relationships, meet
Hmm.
new interesting people.
Sure.
And in the pursuit of more better relationships, I'm finding the writing is increasing my connection count
Yeah.
exponentially. Um, the biggest problem I have now is applying some kind of a filter so that I don't get overwhelmed with the new contacts.
Yes.
Um, so but it's giving me that energy to keep going, keep going, keep going. I've somehow managed to link this business process of having a newsletter with a much more important personal goal of mine.
Yeah.
Um, I think that'll get me through the wall.
Yep.
Um, let's see if I'm still writing a year from now, Mike, and we'll see if it
I
works.
will I will be paying attention. Yeah, because I don't know. I had an experience where our oldest daughter, she was just about to go off to university. This was 2 years ago, and I was just merrily, living life, doing my thing, and I'm the fun guy in the youth group and all this, the fun dad. So my wife and I chaperoned her prom, and super fun. I'm like one of the kids there. I'm taking pictures with the kids, and we're shucking and jiving and having a good time. And then the kids go off and do their thing, and us adults are all kind of gathered around. And I was like, "Oh my goodness, she's leaving. She's leaving here in a couple months." And my wife's like, "Where have you been for 17 years? Like, this is not news, right? We knew this was coming." And I got kind of bummed out, and I was like, "Oh man, that's kind of snuck up on me." It hadn't, obviously, but we went on a sort of a graduation trip to Europe and had a good time. Then we came back and packed her up and moved her to Windsor to university. And I remember I came home and I stood in her dark bedroom and cried. And I was like, "Ah, dude, I was not ready for this." And from that point on, I was like, I need to make sure that my time is spent very, very well, right? So my tolerance for other people's bullshit like went right to the basement. And
Right.
it's like, who can I connect with that, you know, I'm only going to spend my time with good people who I care about, who care about me. I set up my business a little differently. It's not a great big business at all. It does well, but it's just myself and my wife.
Mhm.
And we don't serve energy vampires, and we've got it set up pretty well, but it's all in the name of protecting our time. And our other daughter, she's 4 years younger, so now I've turned into like ninja safeguard mode with her time, where it's like I'm not smothering her or being a helicopter parent, but I'm making sure that she knows darn well that we're here for her, and that time is what matters above everything else.
Right.
um, so I really love the stuff that you share about, the crossover between business and your life. So, and that was the main reason to reach out. It was like, okay, Sanjay is at this spot where he's the master of his destiny for sure, in a spot where a lot of us aspire to be. So, um, it's I got a sharp eye on like how it's going, like what you're doing with that sort of as a future pace for myself.
Yeah, it's everybody says money doesn't solve your problems or buy happiness.
Sure.
And it solves a lot of problems and it buys a little happiness,
Yeah.
but it really doesn't make the problems go away. It's just I'm just anxious about different things.
Yeah.
Um, I was a member of this group called Tiger 21 for a little while, which was about
Okay.
15 people who had achieved some level of wealth through whatever real estate or selling their companies.
Yeah.
And we would go around every week or every month rather, and each person would present their estate plan, where their finances all were. So it was very real.
Yeah.
And they would talk about their life and their problems. And every single last one of them, their problems are all around family. It was
Yeah.
like, this child isn't talking to me. My third ex-wife is fighting with my second ex-wife. It was just relationship issues all the way through. And I didn't actually have those. And I
Yeah.
felt like, oh my God, have I dodged a bullet on
Yeah.
this one? And fortunately, that was when I had just sold my company. And it taught me something super valuable about valuing the relationships in my life. And I think my wife and I at that point were starting to drift apart a little bit. It brought us back together.
Hmm.
This realization that this relationship's a lot more important than it might seem in the moment, right?
Sure.
Maintaining the fidelity of that relationship, and then as with you, like this focus on the kids,
Yeah.
they're going to be gone, right?
Yeah.
And the more real you can make that now, like you're almost lucky that you've got that 4 year gap, right?
Yeah.
Because the
I
first
think
one
so.
leaving makes the second one much more real, and you get to experience that time.
Yeah. And did you sort of when you're going through the buildup of the businesses and audiobooks and stuff like that, um, did you have sort of a focus on your family where you said like this is one of my big rocks as they call it, to make sure that you're, not the business comes first and everything else is second?
I'm going to go with that particular bit of wisdom came later in my life. So
Okay.
the first, I mean, I got married about 4 years into the 13-year path of audiobooks.com.
Okay.
And I would say that there were 4 or 5 years there where I was really focused more on the business.
Yeah.
I don't think I would consider myself a big workaholic or something, but I remember one time lying in bed and looking at a spreadsheet. My wife was beside me and she said, "Is this what our life is going to be like? Are you going to be doing
Yeah.
this forever?" And I said, "Give me 1 year, right? It's going to be like this for a year,
Yeah.
and then I think I'll figure this out, and I'll hire some people, and we'll solve it." And because I said that out loud, a year later, I was able to actually extract myself a little bit from the business,
Hmm.
delegate to responsibilities, and meet my commitment to her to not have the computer in bed.
Nice.
Uh,
Yeah.
so it did
Yeah.
help. But you can have those conversations, right? So,
Yeah. Spreadsheets aren't super romantic, I guess. Especially not in bed, right? Oh, that's good. No, it's good to have that insight though, because I started my little marketing company here, so I do paid media, so Facebook ads, Instagram ads, and it's kind of shifted into coaching
mhm.
folks on their funnels, their landing pages, and all of that. Um, and it was built on the side of my engineering job. Then I kept getting laid off in engineering, and I was like, wow, maybe we shove this aside and just go full time on this. Worked out pretty good. There's been good and bad. We're not filthy rich, but we're doing all right. Everybody ate today. And then my wife left her job and joined this too.
Well, that
Now,
means things are going well.
yeah, and it's like we have the freedom to, if we want to take a day off or we have a doctor's appointment, it doesn't matter when it is. We just go and do it, and that's super, super freeing. And I get all these things that come in where they're like, "Hey, grow your business, fill your calendar, get 1,000 clients." I'm like, I kind of don't want that, like I have friends that make multiples of what I do. I'm like, right, but you're always, always working, and I'm just not. So I don't know that I want to trade, so that's where we're at right now is like, how can we take the handful of clients and then the knowledge that we both have and spin it into even more leverage where we can help more people without burying ourselves in time. So that's kind of our current challenge, I guess you'd say.
Well, I mean, the fact that you just said that out loud,
Yeah.
I believe that means you're going to get there. right?
Yeah.
Whereas if what you had said is we need to grow this thing,
Yeah.
right? Without some kind of a parameter on the other side of, well, what are you willing to give up? Um, I think you've got a great process going. And the fact that you're both there and you can talk about it later at night,
Yeah.
again, it's
We try to
more,
keep
more.
try to keep a lid on the work talk too, because we'll get at the supper table with the three of us, and our daughter will say, "Oh, work, work, work," and then we're like, "Okay, yeah, turn it off," and we shut it down.
Yeah.
Um, I had a couple questions. So I did a thing where I'm always fascinated by audience. You know what, any audience that you or I or anybody else have, what they want to know.
Mhm.
So putting this interview out there and then inviting them to come back and check it out, I thought a good way to do that was say, "What's your question?" Then they'll come back and check it out. So Kyle Ackerman asks, "How do you handle problems that arise in your companies?" And he's asking, like, do you resolve them right on the spot or do you manage them long term?
So um, I have a I didn't invent this, but it's an approach I've adopted in all my companies and in my life in general, which is you come up with you identify a problem, um, then you come up with a hypothetical solution, and it can be anybody's solution. It can be a dumb idea, it can be what seems like a great idea, and
Yeah.
then you say, and here's the key part, you say, I'm going to try an experiment. Define the parameters of the experiment. I'm going to do this for 3 months and we'll see how that addresses the problem. Or I'm
Right.
going to do this tomorrow and we'll see how that addresses the problem. And as long as you frame it as an experiment and all you're trying to do is learn something from that experiment, um, it removes all these barriers of thinking it has to work or is it a good idea or a bad
Yeah.
idea. All you're doing is running an experiment. And my staff got really good at this at all of my companies where I would say, I don't know about that. And they'd say, it's an experiment. I'd be like,
Oh,
oh, well, I can't say no to an experiment. So
yeah.
that's it. I remember with Coffee Oyster Champagne, the my speakeasy bar, we had a problem with people standing around with their coats on and making
Okay.
it look like they were on their way out. And so uh, we instituted a paid coat check. And it turned out people didn't mind paying for coat check.
Yeah.
Um, and we gave the money to the person doing the coat check so that they were excited about doing the coat check as well. And all of a sudden, it made everybody happier. Like that was an
Hmm.
instantaneous solution. But I was the one who was in the way and saying, I don't want to pay for coat check, right?
Yeah.
Or I don't want to have a paid coat check. It seems like an unfriendly thing to do.
Yeah.
Then somebody said, it's an experiment.
Yep.
Fine, an experiment. We can do that. Yeah.
Got
Yeah.
it. So your own thing came back to you, right? Like they reminded you of your own
Yeah.
sort of system. That's awesome. Just got a couple more. So my buddy Dr. Gary Whitaker says, how does one receive $55 million in a buyout? Is that a check? Is it equity and assets? I guess Gary's got some stuff to sell, maybe.
So what happened was we had a fixed price for the sale, um, and that money was wired into my account on December 31st of the year I
Okay.
sold, 2016.
Yep.
Um, but a third of the total sale price was in equity of the buying company.
Okay. Yep.
And that was at my request because I knew something about the private equity fund that was managing the process, and they had 2 years left on their current fund, and they were going to try and flip the company pretty quickly.
Hmm.
So, so in fact, what I got was two-thirds of the amount that we had settled on,
Okay.
and and an agreement that I had this much equity in this other company. And then, sure enough, 2 years later, they sold my company for double what I had sold it for.
Oh, wow.
I still participated in that increased upside,
Yep.
um, which actually almost doubled the amount I got for the company.
Oh,
So
that's amazing.
it was a beautiful deal. But yeah, it was seriously, it was like one day I looked at my bank account and there was a massive amount of cash. And it was like I had never seen that much money in one place before.
Yeah.
It's kind of a
Not a
fun
bad
process.
feeling, probably.
Yeah, and I also have to say, I understood and prepared. I had really good financial advisors, so I had prepared for this as a tax consequence for a decade. Um, and so when it came, I was very tax advantaged, and
Yeah.
so I actually kept a lot more of that money than most people would have been able to.
Nice. I mean, I have 1,000 questions just hit my brain with that alone. But we'll circle back. My cousin Donna, she wants to know, What was the process like in building audiobooks.com? What does it take to build a strong, sellable company?
Well, if you build a company that's got strong cash flow, and audiobooks.com did have strong positive cash flow, you will get buyout offers. They'll just be coming in all the
Yeah.
time. I used to get a call every 3 months or so. Once we got to this certain point of people knew we had, say, more than 20 million in revenue, and we were doing a few million in free cash, and the offers were just coming constantly. Now, how we got there, I thought we were going to go bankrupt 6 months out because we were getting one customer every second day, and we realized, oh my God, we need to launch. We were a purely Canadian business,
Yeah.
and we realized that unless we could launch a US audiobook service quickly, we were going to go out of business. And so the experiment we ran was we put up an ad um, to Americans saying we had a facility to ship them audiobooks when we didn't have the facility.
Mhm.
Uh, and we just wanted to see how many people signed up for it. And Google AdWords had just come out, and we figured out how to use AdWords. And all of a sudden, we got 10 customers the first day,
Yeah.
after we were getting a half a customer a day. And we ran that for 3 days. We got 30 customers. And it's like, boom, yeah, okay, experiment's a massive success. Now let's go apologize to those 30 people
Yeah.
and go build a warehouse in Buffalo, New York. So that was the first bump we hit. There were bump, 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 plateau of growth for years. Like, couldn't figure out how to get into digital download audiobooks. Every few years there'd be some problem. We'd solve it. And then one year we'd been thinking about buying the domain name audiobooks.com. The company was called Simply Audiobooks up until then.
Mhm.
And this guy wanted $1 million for this domain. He actually wanted 1.5 million US dollars. And um, over this period of time, the Canadian dollar had gotten stronger and stronger and stronger. So in Canadian dollars, the price actually came down pretty substantially. He
Yeah.
got a little bit more reasonable, and suddenly we were able to buy it for what amounted to $1 million Canadian, and bought it, and everything went crazy after that.
Yeah.
Like, we had done the math, we knew it was worth a lot more than the guy thought it was. But even I was surprised by the result when we got the natural domain.
Yeah.
Um, and then a few years later we sold the business.
Yeah. That's amazing. Um, I know we're getting close to time here. Maybe we'll have to circle back for interview part two, but you mentioned taxes. I'm Canadian as well, and that's like for me, it's a struggle, quite honestly. And we have this thing where our little business has a bunch of cash in the bank, and I'm not trying to throw my wife under the bus, but she'll see it and she's like, "Okay, why can't we have our money?" I'm like, "That's the corporation's money." So we go back and forth with that. So last year we got a notice from our accountant. He's like, "Hey, great job, you tripled your income this year." I'm like, "What? No, we didn't." He's like, "It's my job. This is what I do. Go look at the book." So I did, and I was like, "Oh, wow, interesting." And as it didn't mean much to me, I mean, we just carry on and do what we do. But the questions start to come up like, well, how do we take that? How do we get some of this money for ourselves? And we ran into roadblocks where it's like, they're trying to protect us from the CRA and watch your how much you get taxed, and he's got a job to do. Um, at the time, one of my biggest clients was real estate billionaire Grant Cardone.
Mhm.
And Grant was just masterful with the US tax system. And he's like, you got to learn your country's tax system. Almost
Mm.
nobody does this. I'm like, okay, great. How do I add that onto my list of things? So I guess what I'm asking is how do I basically, as a small, very, very small Canadian corporation, um, I guess understand enough about the tax system that you're getting good service from your
Mm.
providers, or you know what to ask and who to hire? It's a big
So
question, I know.
it's a big question. So I was taught at a young age as a teenager by my father two axioms around taxes. One is he said you have to understand your tax return. I mean, I don't understand my tax return anymore. I'm past that
Yeah,
stage. Back then, it's like, son, you need to understand your tax return so you understand what your accountant's doing and you can correct their mistakes. And for many, many years, I was correcting my accountant's mistakes or saying, what about this? Or why didn't you consider this?
yeah,
That was one. The other thing he said is you always have to pay some taxes. If
yeah,
you don't pay any taxes, that's when you get into trouble.
yeah.
So just make sure you always pay some taxes. Um, uh, and then I just, for me, when I found good professionals, I hung on to them. I remember um, the the person who's guided my tax strategy the most was an accountant at Deloitte. back in the day.
Mhm.
And I remember being in a room with him. We were talking about something else, and just I said, "Hey, I saw an ad about some offshore account where I could put money there and then use a debit card to get the money out. Like, what's up with offshore accounts?" And it was like, "You really want to know?" And it was la 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 la. And the
Yeah.
particular strategy we used can't be used anymore. They closed the loophole. But audiobooks.com was based out of Barbados,
Okay.
right? We did a sale early on, sold it to a Barbados company, ran it out of there. All of our customer service, a bunch of other functions were down there. And it meant that when the company got sold at the corporate level, we paid 2% Barbados tax, repatriable to Canada tax free. I still had to pay 50% personal tax, but
Yeah.
all that money was in my corporate account and compounding every year.
Yeah.
So, and then I used an insurance strategy, buying whole life insurance in the name of the company to take a bunch of that out personally, tax free.
Okay.
So there's limitations, like you need to have a certain amount of money in that corporate account to use
Yeah.
the insurance strategy. But it took me a long time to learn enough about that to trust it because it seemed like such a scammy thing. All these
Yeah.
insurance agents trying to sell me on this thing, but it's real. Every every person who's got a bunch of corporate money sitting in an account somewhere uses life insurance as a strategy to get it out
Gotcha.
um,
Gotcha.
at a reduced tax rate.
Yeah, I think I'm probably asking like down the road questions of my accountant. I think he's a great accountant, but I think I'm asking questions that may not even apply, at the $1 million level. We're not at the $50 million level, but the way my
Well,
brain
and I mean, the thing
want to
is,
get
there's
there.
lots of strategies that do apply at the $1 million level.
Sure.
And so you just have to figure out what those are. Unfortunately, there's a lot of good books out there
Yeah.
on stuff like this. And but you're right, you're busy. Your business isn't understanding taxes. My business isn't understanding taxes. But
Right.
actually, I had enough of an interest in saving money that it kept me reading things like, I don't know, The Wealthy Barbers, like
Yeah.
you read these books and you find out about other books. And there's a fantastic book called The Psychology of Money
Okay.
um, that I would encourage you to read,
Yep.
right? It's a really good starting point. Like it's just well written. Um, and it surprised me because it covers a bunch of areas that I thought I already understood, but because I read this just like 6 months ago. Um, and yeah, highly recommend it. Easy
Yeah.
book to read. It'll put you in the right headspace and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, that's good. Just to circle back to the start of our call, the person making the comments, I'm like, seems like somebody that's just not been taken an interest in these things at all, right? And is just like has their guard up.
Yep.
Like my wife and I are years into this, trying to learn the best we can and hire good people, and so far so good. So it's very interesting, but it's good to hear your take on these things.
Yeah, if I could say, like one of the things that that people should do
Yeah,
related to that comment is if you're wondering about something, ask somebody who's been there and done that,
yeah,
right? So if you're wondering about how to save money on taxes, ask me. I
yeah,
can I can tell you who to talk to,
sure,
right? Ask like your accountant, in all likelihood, hasn't had to deal with this situation before, right? Talk to
yeah,
somebody who's had to deal with the situation before. If you want to ask somebody what's involved in having a happy marriage, ask somebody who's in a happy marriage,
yeah,
not
yep,
not somebody who just got divorced, right? They're not going to be in the right headspace. So, how to get out of depression? Talk to you,
yeah,
right? You've been there, done that.
yep.
Um, yeah, making sure you get advice from the right people, that's a huge component of this.
Yeah, we'll have to come on down to Marked and have some cocktails and dinner and and carry this on. That'd be super fun.
Absolutely, Mike. If you're in the city, right, come on in.
Yeah, sounds
We have
good.
fantastic brunch on weekends at Marked and drinks anytime at Coffee Oyster Champagne.
Awesome. So where can people find you, or do you want them to find you?
Okay. My newsletter website is sanjaysays.co.
Yep.
Go there, read my stuff. If you like it, sign up. And we can engage in a conversation because you can comment on my articles and I will always comment back.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Highly recommend. Like I said, maybe I oversold it at the start, but I find it wildly entertaining. I think it's super useful, it's impactful, and it's fun to read. So I think it's one of my faves for sure. Thank you,
Uh,
sir. Appreciate your time, and I'll get this posted, let you know when it's live, and we will keep in touch.
I appreciate it. All right. Thanks, Mike.
Take care, Sanjay.